Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Marchesi. I am a PhD student in linguistics at the University of New Mexico. I am originally from Argentina, and I will be discussing with you all some of the findings that we have found with research within the linguistics department at the Lobo Language Acquisition Lab. And in that lab in particular, we focus on bilingualism. We carry out research on English and Spanish, or English and Navajo, or American Sign Language with bilingual and multilingual speakers. And in my case in particular, I focus on language acquisition by children. There are some things that we know about being bilingual. Some of the benefits of being bilingual include that bilingualism confers cognitive benefits, and these benefits extend over the lifespan, and that the support for a minority language has a great impact on children's academic success, as well as their overall health, mental health, and well-being. And bilingual people often perform better on tasks that require conflict management, and bilingual people also perform better than monolingual people, that is, people who only speak one language, at tasks that tap into what we call inhibitory control ability. And this has to do with the ability to, when we have several stimuli coming to us, inhibiting, covering, or setting in the background some stimuli in order to focus on one part in particular. And this is the ability to also ignore competing, so perceptual information or stimuli that is competing, and we can focus on one while inhibiting the other tasks. One example of this is the Stroop task that I'm going to be showing on the next slide. You can feel free to pause the screen or the presentation and then try doing it. If you have friends or other people who are monolingual, who don't speak more than one language, it is always fun to do it with them and to see whether it takes longer for them to perform the task or not when compared to someone that is bilingual. And so in the task, you're going to see here names of colors written, and the names of the colors are written in ink that is a different color. And so what you have to mention is the color of the ink, not the name of the color written. So for example, for the first word that I see, I would say green. I would not say yellow, because yellow is written on green ink. So you want to say green, red, and so on and so forth. And this is kind of this task where we have competing information and we have to block what we are reading in order to focus on the color. Bilingual people are also better than monolingual people at switching between tasks. So this is associated, for instance, with multitasking. When bilinguals have to switch from categorizing objects by color to then categorizing them by shape, again, we see this effect where the bilingual brain reacts faster at performing those tasks. And finally, the cognitive control required to manage multiple languages appears to have also broad effects on neurological function, fine-tuning both what has to do with cognitive control mechanisms as well as sensory processes. And so what we see here is the task that I was describing. So let's imagine that this is an online task. And so a person has to click on the maroon box, on the red heart, and so the instructions appear on the maroon box, and the instructions can be put all the triangles in this rectangle, or it can be put the red triangles in the box, things like that. And so if each of these boxes contains a different instruction that requires color or shape or both, bilinguals are going to be faster at going from box to box than monolinguals. Bilingualism in New Mexico is defined by the need for culturally and linguistically relevant education. And to make that happen, we need to also change the narrative on what childhood bilingualism is in order to reinforce all the benefits that bilingualism has, instead of seeing it as something to be avoided. Being bilingual, translanguaging, using different languages within one same conversation and in different environments within New Mexico, not only at school, for instance, which is what is happening nowadays mainly. And parents and children are still faced with messages that success is measured in English. If we think of the education system, all of the standardized testing is carried out in English or based on the idea of monolingual English speakers, instead of acknowledging that we have speakers that speak more than one language in New Mexico. So this is associated with what we call the deficit view of bilingualism, and that is that when we measure academic attainment, even if we use languages other than English, the tools that are being used are usually tools designed for English-only speakers, such as the SAT exams or the ACT. And this bias towards monolingualisms promotes this idea of a deficit view of bilinguals lack something. And that is an erroneous message, because what we are saying is because people are using multiple languages and maybe their use of the language has particular characteristics, we say that it is inadequate or simplistic or incomplete. And this deficit view, which is prevalent in societies, in some societies in particular, has the common over and under identification of language disorders in bilingual populations, for instance. So we see that the parents are told that their kids are not acquiring the language in the way they should be, when in reality, they are just acquiring it in their own particular path, because these students or these children are handling with multiple things, multiple pieces of information at the same time and in different languages. So it's going to be a more complex language acquisition process. So as I mentioned before, I am part of the Lobo Language Acquisition Lab. And that is a lab that focuses on research on Navajo, ASL, and Spanish, sometimes in connection with English as well. And some of our findings include that grammar is variable and different ways of speaking can coexist within a speech community. And what a textbook teaches doesn't always match what a community might be using in the language, and that is called community norms. So if we look at the two examples that we have here, there are 2 books here, there's 2 books here. Even within English speakers, some people will tend to say that one is more correct than the other, or that they have a preference for one over the other one. But it's actually a matter of preference and what others in the English speaking community use. Another example is the Spanish one here. Habían 2 libros aquí, había 2 libros aquí. So traditional grammar books will say había 2 libros aquí. However, we're going to hear a lot habían 2 libros aquí, and it is very popular and highly used. So if it's highly used in the community, why do we still have books saying that that is not okay? So the idea is that we should base the description of how languages work and how we acquire languages on what we see in practice in actual speakers of the language, rather than on what a textbook says. So 2 studies that we carried out were on demonstratives, and that's words similar to this, that, and we used it with English and Spanish, and then the sound r and r in Spanish as well. We carried out the research with English, Spanish bilingual kids, and both studies illustrate how bilinguals follow their own path of language development, and that path is a distinct one that we cannot compare with how monolingual speakers develop their languages. So what part of the linguistic theory that we discussed in relation to these 2 research activities have to do with the fact that children learn from the input. So whatever they hear, they read, whatever is around them, and they store it in their minds in something that we could call like a OneDrive or your OneCloud. So it's the cloud of productions. And so every time we hear a word or a sound, we will store that information in our mind. And because the storing is uneven, some information will be heavy and the other one will not, because they will hear more often there are 2 books or there's 2 books So eventually, some samples that I get in my cloud will decay or fade, and I won't use them as much as the other ones that are the preferred ones by my community. So this has to do with each experience, strengthening some productions and weakening others that are not so common in my community. So variation in sounds among adults will therefore have an implied variation in sounds among children. And children's language use will depend on the sounds or the words or the grammar constructions of their own community in particular. This is important because we learn that children mirror the language patterns found in their community. So instead of saying that a child has a language problem or a language development problem, we should see what the community, what the people near the child are producing. Because children mirror that. And they also, bilingual children also follow their own path of development, of language development, that is going to be different from monolinguals because these students or these speakers are acquiring more than one language at the same time. These can help us to replace assumptions on what people are supposed to sound like or what they are supposed to say with knowledge on what actually is happening in each community in order to empower our local varieties. And we can also provide educators with tools to teach in a differentiated way this bilingual population that has unique characteristics. And so we envision a kind of New Mexico where linguistic and cultural diversity flourishes, where children's multilingualism is an asset. And we think that if we disseminate research like the one that we carry out at our lab, then we can demonstrate the importance of supporting the development of minority languages in New Mexico. Thank you very much.